Speaking with us this morning in studio live is licensed professional counselor Bernadette Graham. She will address the suicidal ideation, which means when people are thinking or planning suicides. Not all thoughts may include the actual or final act of suicide, but just the ideology of suicide. Good morning, Bernadette. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Ryan. How are you? All right.
Ask you.
Turn it up. Well, I am a retired grandmother, wife, mother. Have been retired, probably about 18 years now. Enjoying retirement and happily married and enjoying life one day at a time.
And I understand that you're opening on stage with one of the queens of comedy, the famous Monique. How did that come about?
Well, that came about in 2013. She was playing at our local comedy club, the Funny Bone. I was in attendance at that show, and I met her after the show, and I told her that I had just started venturing into doing stand-up comedy. Didn't get started till I was 63 years young. She couldn't believe that I was 63 trying to hit a stage to do comedy for the first time. And so, sight unseen, she asked me if I would play on stage with her the next night. And I did. I was well received. She enjoyed my set and called me back to the green room and asked me if I could go the following weekend to play on stage with her at the Columbus Funny Bone, which I did. And I've been playing on stage with her from time to time ever since November 2013.
Before you ventured out into comedy, had you ever done entertainment before?
Well, growing up as a child, I would attend summer camps, and I would always perform for my cabin in a talent contest. They would always choose me, and I would always sing this little song, "He's got the whole world in his hands," and I would always come in first place. And then from there, I started singing in choirs, on stages, in many churches, singing in choirs. I always did lead vocal. I directed choirs, so I never had any stage fright. From there, I started singing in talent contests on cruise ships. And from there, stand-up comedy.
That is awesome. So you had the bug, you just didn't have the platform.
Yeah, I had the bug because my parents were entertainers. My father was a renowned saxophone player, playing with greats like Count Basie, Duke Ellington. And my mother was a singer on radio stations here in Toledo, Ohio. So I have it in my DNA.
Oh, that is excellent. That's exciting. Now, you're working on a documentary. This is something else that you probably did not anticipate. How did you get started on that project?
Well, I lost my 25-year-young grandson, Ajane. We called him AJ, Xavier Jamal Burt. At the age of 25, he lived in San Antonio, Texas, and he died by suicide, took his own life February the 18th, 2017. And of course, him being my firstborn grandchild, I grieved so heavily behind that. When I got the call, I just dropped to my knees in pain and disbelief. And then I decided in September 2018 to take a trip to San Antonio just to be in his essence, his aura. I went to the place where he took his life. I visited and talked to other people that knew him on his job in different places, places he used to party, nightclubs. I went and talked to these people that knew him. And then when I came back, I walked in a suicide group here in Toledo called the Out of Darkness suicide group. They had a walk this past October, and when I walked in that walk, I met so many people who had lost loved ones due to suicide, and I felt a kinship with these people. And as I was at the meeting, it must have been 3,000 or 4,000 people walking. decided at that time I needed to do something to rechannel my grief. And the thought woke me up one morning. I woke up out of my sleep with wanting to do a documentary about my grandson's life and his death. So that's how that project got started. When I went to San Antonio and Santa Rosa, Texas, where he's buried, some of his ashes, I have some of them. That's what basically gave me the idea. I had a film director accompany me with some friends, and she took a lot of live shots, a lot of still pictures. And when I came back home is when I decided, let me try to put these pictures and still shots in a documentary and tell his story and be his voice, because he's not here to tell his story. A very sad, tragic story that it was. So that's how that came about.
Now, just like you didn't have any experience as a comedian, you hadn't been in entertainment before, and yet you ventured out. This sounds like another venture that you had not been groomed for, yet you saw the need, you saw the opportunity to memorialize your grandchild in a different way. You didn't have any experience as a videographer, right?
No, sir. Okay. None. Like I said, I had a film director. She was an amateur, but she had more experience than I did along those lines. And we did the best we could to put the documentary together. But then I contacted a friend of mine that lives in Atlanta, and I sent him the trailer that I had done with the film director. And he looked at it and he said, I can understand the story that you're telling, but you need a little bit more professionalism, because the lighting and the sound wasn't of HBO, Showtime, Netflix, PBS quality. He says, I have another friend of mine that's a professional film director that I'm going to send this film to him. So when the film director, he's out of New York, looked at the film, his juices creatively started flowing, and he said, I know where you're trying to go with this, and I'm going to help you get there. So that's when he came up with a more professional film trailer, and he's working on the documentary right now. It's in production.
That's wonderful. So God just keeps putting the right people in your life and keeps putting you in the right place at the right time to make new experiences come together. The project, you said that he understood what you were trying to do. How has the project been received as you've been going around talking to different people and letting them know what you're doing and everything that's going on with your motivation? How is it being received?
It seems to be getting received pretty well, because it just went on YouTube about a month ago, and the viewership is, really coming up daily, where people are watching it and giving me feedback. I've had people contact me privately through Facebook and Instagram telling me their stories about wanting to attempt suicide and knowing people that have attempted suicide and have succeeded. So I'm able to talk to young people, and I'm hoping one day that I can even take this a little bit to the next level and step by talking to people, whether in schools, jails, prisons, or whatever, to get the word out that no one has to suffer in silence with mental illness and depression. There's help out there if you want it.
Now, you got with the suicide group. How did you find that group that you did the walk with?
Well, I was asking around to different people, where could I go, because I needed to talk to somebody. And so I originally started going to this bereavement group called Compassionate Friends. This is a group where parents and grandparents have lost their children and grandchildren, and siblings have lost their siblings. So I originally started going there and found great help in talking with people that had lost loved ones. But I needed something more. I needed to talk to someone that had loved ones that had passed from suicide. So I found a group in Bowling Green, Ohio, a suicide group that I have been attending now for probably about 10 months, that I don't even have to speak sometime. I sit back and listen to their story, and it sounds just like mine. So I have a home that I can go to where nobody judges me, nobody says insensitive things to me, because I've had insensitive things said to me about suicide, because suicide has this religious stigma attached to it, where I had someone tell me one time, like 2 weeks after my grandson had passed, did you know that people that take their lives go to hell? That was the wrong thing to say to the Queen. That was the wrong thing to say. I had another one a week after I had just got back from San Antonio, Texas, burying my grandson. And this person said to me, if you don't stop talking about your grandson, you're going to damage your heart. At that point, I did not care about my heart. And who else was I supposed to talk about a week after losing my grandson? Insensitive things. So not only do I want to discuss suicide, depression, mental illness, I would like to talk about the insensitivities that people can have towards others that have lost loved ones, especially by suicide, because that's a delicate subject, and that's something that I've never experienced in my life, trying to deal with this, because there's questions that will never be answered, because my grandson is no longer here to tell me what was going on in his mind the day that it happened.
Yeah, the only time that you can get any answers, or the only way you can get any answers, is usually through the friends and the environment that they occupied before they left us. And you did that. You went to San Antonio to talk to everyone that you could reach out for. And did you find a lot of support when you went down to San Antonio? Because they didn't know you did that.
No, nobody knew me, and I introduced myself when I went on this job. You know, there was 5 or 6 people that I got testimonials from, but they were very willing to talk about him, because in talking about him, it was comforting. It was comforting to hear the positive stories about him, because there were more positive stories that were being told to me than anything negative. I mean, he had a big heart. He was very generous. He had a gracious smile. Just so many positive things, because, see, I lived in Ohio, so I didn't get the chance to see my grandson often. Plus, he had served 3.5 years in prison due to a domestic violence charge that was brought on him. So I didn't get a chance to see him, although me and my husband in 2014 did visit him in Beeville, Texas. That's at the very end of Texas, close to the Mexican border. We had went to Dallas to go to a niece that I have wedding. And I told my husband before I left Ohio, I'm not going to the state of Texas without, I don't care how far it takes for us to get to where my grandson is, I have got to go see him. And I remember when we were waiting in the waiting room, and when he walked into the room and we seen him, because I hadn't seen him probably 8 years prior to that visit, we embraced, and I must have gave him 1,000 kisses. Little did I know 2.5 years ago that he wouldn't be here. But you know what? Let me say this. I think I won't say the cause of it, but it was on his mind for 13 years, because his mother, at 31 years old, took her life. She left 5 children from the ages of 2 months. She just had a baby. My grandson was the oldest at 12. She left those 5 babies here to struggle with her suicide. And my grandson, being the oldest and of mixed heritage, which he's black, he has white and Mexican in him, because his mother was white and Mexican. Out of the 5 children that his mother left behind, he was the only one that didn't get taken by a family member.
Only one.
Only one. The other 4, which were of Mexican descent for the most part, family took them. Nobody wanted my grandson. And so he struggled with that. He had to go into foster care and deal with his mother's death in foster care with people that didn't really care about him. A lot of these foster, I won't say a lot, but there are some that are in foster care because of the money that they receive. And they get more money when they prescribe drugs to these children, I understand. And my grandson was put on drugs, which caused the foster care people to receive more money. A lot of times he didn't take those drugs the time or whatever. But I think it stayed in his mind. If I could talk to him today, I'm sure his mother's suicide played a big part in him taking his life, because he looked at it almost like, when something comes down the pike that's too difficult for me to handle, I'll just take my life. Because he had tried to do it as a teenager. He was what they call a cutter, if you know what a cutter is. There's children that take razor blades or knives and they cut their arms, not so deep where it penetrates a vein or artery or something, but they just make these cut marks, enough just for it to surfacely bleed. And he was a cutter. He could have cut a little deeper, because in reading his Facebook post, he had attempted suicide as a teenager, but he kept trying. And I do believe if it wasn't for me as his grandmother, he would have taken his life younger. But I kept that baby going. I kept him uplifted. My husband kept him uplifted. We wrote him letters. We accepted his phone calls. I don't care, collect what time of day or night. We kept him going. But it was a perfect storm the week that he took his life. He was going through too much at one time. They had picked him up for DUI. Only thing he could see in his mind was prison again. I'm not going back there, because I had some young men that were his cellmates write me privately after they got out and told me, Mrs. Belcher, you don't want to know what your grandson went through. I can't even imagine. He thought when he got that DUI 2 days before he took his life that his parole officer was going to send him back to prison because he had broke parole violation. And there was a young lady on the scene that gave us this story. He was going to run, but he decided, I don't want to run and keep looking over my shoulder. So he decided, it was February the 18th, 2017, he made the decision consciously that I'm not going to go through this. I'm out of here. And his mother there was a cemetery across from where he lived. And the way I understand through the witness, he went over to the cemetery and he sat in that cemetery for a few minutes. And in my heart and mind, I'm thinking that he probably went there to talk to his mother, although she wasn't buried in that, but the symbolism of a cemetery. He talked to his mother to let her know, I'm on my way. Because he came back and he did it.
That is very profound. But you never know what the motivations are. Bernadette, you're a licensed counselor, and I'm sure that at some point you had to talk to people about suicide. You're also a licensed grief counselor as well?
Yes, I'm certified in grief and bereavement.
What stories do you hear? Because typically we don't deal well with suicide in the African American community.
Correct.
So what do you find, what do you encounter when you're dealing with people of African American orientation that their thoughts are about suicide?
Well, I'll start with this. What Ms. Cookie has just said is true. I mean, her experiences, the things that you've gone through, the things with your grandson, is very common and it's very true. And it's a stigma. Mental health illnesses and mental health care in the Black community, there's a stigma that there's nothing wrong with me. And then there's issues with access to care. And there's not that many Black mental health professionals out there. And a lot of Black Americans, they want to go to a Black counselor because there's a multicultural component and they feel more comfortable. And when you don't have access to that, you're unable to reach out to someone to share your stories and to get things off your chest and to see if you do actually have a mental illness. Over 40 million Americans each year are diagnosed with a mental illness. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death among Americans, and it's the third highest among Black Americans, ages 15 to 24. So those numbers are huge. I've been working in mental health for over 12 years, and I've worked with a lot of youth. I've worked with a lot of African Americans, and it was one of the reasons why I became a counselor. I lost my mother when I was 14 suddenly. She died in her sleep. I was offered to go to counseling. I did not want counseling because I did not feel comfortable. And years later, I just found myself wondering, what is it about this grief component? Why am I still feeling like this? And I didn't want to kill myself. I'm 14, I'm a freshman in high school. I don't want to live anymore. My mother was my life. I mean, that was my future, and I couldn't imagine my life without my mother. So as I grew into an adult and I left the military, I went ahead and started college to become a mental health professional. And I wanted to focus on the grief and bereavement component. And before I could even get too far into that, I was just seeing the disparities among African Americans in the Black community, where they don't want to come to counseling. When people ask me, what do you do? And I said, I'm a mental health counselor, they kind of look at me like, oh, like there's something wrong with that. I'm like, no. Just like you go to the doctor to get a physical and you go to the dentist to get your teeth checked out, it's also important to go get a mental health checkup sometimes. There doesn't have to be something wrong with you. And obviously, there's something wrong with all of us in some way or fashion. There is no perfection in humanism, okay? No. There's none of us are perfect. It's not that we're all going to come out and have a diagnosis of, something major. But we all have issues in life. This is life. We all have issues, even as a mental health professional. So looking at the suicide among Black males, 40% of our youth are in the criminal justice system, 45% are in foster care, and 25% of our African American youth are usually exposed to violence, which leads to sometimes post-traumatic stress disorder. And post-traumatic stress disorder is a major criteria that leads to issues of substance abuse, homicide, and the cycle just continues to go on and on and on. And it's like, where do we stop here? So what you're doing, I wish other people would do. You have a voice. You didn't just shut down and say, my heart is broken. And whoever said to you about you were talking too much about your grandson, I think it's the opposite. If you hold it in, it's going to cause more damage to your body than it is in letting it out. And that's what counseling is all about. You go and you get talk therapy. And sometimes medication is justified, and that's fine. But at least start with the talk therapy, And if you find that you've been to counseling and you had a bad experience, don't stop. Don't give up. Keep trying to find a counselor that you feel comfortable with. You don't need a referral for a counselor. If you go to counseling and you find that you are not having a good relationship with that counselor, ask for another counselor. It's our ethical duty to make sure that you are taken care of and you can be sent to someone whom you feel comfortable with.
All right, thank you. If you're just tuning in this morning, we're speaking with comedian EARLEAN Queen Cookie Belcher and Bernadette Graham, who is a licensed counselor in suicide and grief counseling. Queen Cookie.
Yes.
When is the documentary supposed to be released?
I don't have a release date yet because it's still in production, but as soon as it's released, we have it in 3 film festivals right now, so they have different dates that they view it at the festival. So I think one of the latest dates will be like August 23rd. So we should know something by September 1st, I would believe. Because like I said, we're hoping that one of the film festivals pick it up and then they can sell it to either HBO, Netflix, Showtime, some entity, PBS. And so when that happens, of course, I will let everybody know, because we're looking to even have a screening premiere here in Toledo at the Mommy Indoor Theater. And then there's going to be one in New York, Texas. So as soon as we get that date, of course, the public will know about it.
Oh, that'd be extraordinary, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of support. One, because you are an entertainer, but 2, because this is such a major issue in our community, and people have a lot of questions, but they don't have answers. And that's what someone who has your celebrity is able to provide. One, people are going to trust you because you have celebrity, and number 2, you have access to so many resources that can help people to better understand how to deal with this. How can people contact you if they want to find out more information?
Well, they can go on Facebook. I have a Facebook name, EARLEAN Queen Cookie Mac Belcher. I'm also on Instagram under Queen_Cookie_805. Belcher.
All right. And Bernadette, you're reaching out to people and you're providing counseling. Like you said, a lot of people feel more comfortable dealing with somebody that looks like them.
Right.
How can people get in touch with you, and what other resources are there?
Well, just quickly, I want to say that if you are listening and you know someone or you yourself are feeling suicidal ideation or suicidal, seek out help. You can call 911. They're not going to hang up on you. You can go on the suicide prevention website. There are free apps you can put on your phone, and you will get a live person. You can chat with someone. But don't give up. Your life is meaningful to other people, whether you may know that or not. But it is. So please reach out now if you know anyone or you are having these thoughts of suicide. But you may reach me at graham.bernadette@gmail.com. My phone number is 419-409-4929. My office is located in Maumee, Ohio, and you can find me listed at www.psychologytoday.com, as you may find other counselors and psychologists as well. So even if you don't choose me as a counselor, that's fine. There are many other counselors and psychologists listed on that site, or just start with Google. But if nothing else, talk to your primary care doctor. Like I said, you don't need a referral, but at least seek out the services, because your mental health is just as important as your physical health, if not more. If you cut off your head, you got nothing.
Wow, that's involved.
And I would like to also add another number to that. It's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and that's 1-800-273-TALK. And TALK is the digits 8255.
What other projects are you working on?
Right now, I am so involved with this documentary, trying to contact different ones, doing what I can do on my end. I've probably sent out 100 emails, just trying to get the word out. And also, you can go on YouTube if you want to see the documentary trailer. It's on YouTube under A Cry for Help, the Ajane Burt story. So please go on YouTube and view the trailer, because the documentary will soon be released, and you'll have some idea as what we're trying to convey.
Now let me ask you this question, because it's hard when you're out in the public eye and you've got people running up to you all the time. How do you deal with people being insensitive?
Well, I didn't deal with it too well in the beginning, but going to counseling and support groups, they're able to help me. Sometimes I just walk away, and sometimes I just let them know how they made me feel, because when you walk away, they don't really know how you felt. And you have to show people how to teach you, or they'll keep doing the same thing over and over and over if you never speak up for yourself. Because unless a person have experienced what you have gone through, they don't have a clue. Sometimes I think people think they are comforting by saying things that they say, but sometimes it's just better to listen. You don't have to say anything to me. Just listen to my story. Sometimes I just need a hug. I just need your ear. Just hear me, because I love bringing up my grandson's name. Sometimes people are reluctant to do it because they don't want me to go into this grief process. And I might cry, and it's okay. But I like to hear you bring up my grandson, especially if you knew him. Especially if you knew him. And like I said, just listen to me. Sometimes I might need a hug.
And just to let everyone know, the definition of grief is a normal and natural reaction to a loss of any kind. It is not a diagnosis. That's why it's not in our manual, which we use to diagnose individuals. So it's unique to each individual. Like you said, you grieve how you wish for as long as you wish. There is something called complicated grief, but that's here and there. But a grief process is very personal. And I think it's very phenomenal that you're a comedian and you can laugh about a lot of things that a lot of people can. And laughter brings joy to people's heart. And I tell people all the time who are going through a grieving process, go see a comedy show. Turn on HBO, watch a comedy show on TV, get your laughter going, get those good hormones and juices flowing in your body so that you can laugh.
Yeah, because I know my grandson died in February. The same year, 3 months later, I had already been booked when he passed to play at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, New York. And I'm thinking as I'm rehearsing my routine, as tears are rolling down my face with grief, how am I going to go out and make strangers laugh and my heart is broken in a million pieces? How am I going to do that? Even when I was rehearsing before, I went to the Apollo, I'm rehearsing my routine with tears streaming down my face. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this, but I didn't want to cancel out because it was a golden opportunity. So I went on to the Apollo Theater. It was in May of that same year, like I said, 3 months later. And I got a standing ovation in the Apollo Theater. For those that know the Apollo crowd, they are a hard crowd to work. If they don't like you, they're not going to laugh. And they boo you off the stage. But I got a standing O. So I always believed that my grandson was with me in spirit, that I was able to get through that show. And I also heard a quote that says something to the fact, grief is the final act of love that you have for your loved one. And that stuck with me. But like I said, I'm better today than I am 2.5 years ago. But I still have my moments. Like last week, I seen a Chrysler 300 going down the street, a gray in color. And I started crying because that was the last car that my grandson had drove. Little things like that will trigger you.
Yes, they will.
Or I'll hear a song. It was this song, I can't even think of the name of the title of the song, but it's a song that he used to get on live Facebook and be singing to the song. And I heard that song last week, and it made me think of him, and I got teary-eyed. Just little small things. When I walk down my foyer every day, I walk through my house because I just had a knee replacement, so I had to do exercise daily. And I have a memorial set up in my curio cabinet, and I'll usually walk by and blow a kiss, because I have his picture there. The San Antonio Police Department sent me his cell phone, and when I got the cell phone, it was shattered. The face of it was shattered, and it just reminded me, looking at his phone, that he lived such a tragic, shattered life. This young man had been going through things well before his mother passed of suicide, because she was an alcoholic, she was a drug addict, she was into domestic violence. There was episodes of her going out to the school, fighting on the school premises.
Well, thank you. And this morning we've been talking with comedian EARLEAN, Queen Cookie Belcher, and Bernadette